Andrea Bocconi, welcome to us today. We are delighted to have you here, and I know that you have a long teaching weekend ahead of you with some of our students. We would love for you to share some of your expertise on an area that is of particular interest to you, I know, and that is education. Psychosynthesis and education. What could you tell us about that?
Well, Assagioli was very interested in the field of education. He did even some pioneering research about helping kids who were leader in consciousness, not leader because they were with a high IQ, but because they have a particular consciousness that could cause even problems for them in the school. So he even invited me to become a teacher when I was not considering to be a teacher. And then I found myself teaching to teenagers psychology in the high school for 18 years. And it was a fantastic occasion to make experiment teaching psychosynthesis to teenagers. And that was the start in education for me. Now I'm more involved in education with teachers because working in that community, I could notice how it was difficult for many teachers. It's a profession that requires a lot of competencies that nobody teaches you. So in the last years with Verso Foundation, we are developing a program of using psychosynthesis for teachers training, both in Italy, in South America, and in Asia.
So, do you have any ideas of how that could be implemented in more countries, in the Nordic countries, for instance?
Well, we had a pioneer project. We did a meeting with a few teachers and some people who were interested in this training. And being already present in the academy with all the trainees that are interested in this field, it should be easier to move the wheel fast and to give this training, which is about 4 main areas of competencies. One is knowledge and how to transmit knowledge. But more important than this, to me, is how to deal with all the emotional state about teaching. There is a lot of love in teachings, but even fear, anger, all kind of emotions that teachers sometimes are not ready to deal with. And then there is the point of evaluation, which means to be evaluated and to evaluate. So it's very interesting because it can be threatening. And another point is about power in the room. If you have to deal with 25 teenagers, you must be a decent group leader. Anyone with his style, but you must understand that there is a group dynamic going on. You don't need to be a psychologist or a psychotherapist, but you must be familiar to what happens to you in the situation. So that's the general idea about the training. Then we use the star of functions and the egg as maps of consciousness.
It was a very, very good training module with the teachers that we had invited. So we're hoping that we can continue somehow to build on that for the future.
It's even interesting that the module have been tested in different cultures. Because working with educators of street children in Nicaragua or with Indian teachers in a very interesting project in Sarnath in India, we have seen that the model works. Some themes are universal, even if they are colored by the culture of the place, of course.
It's beautiful, that. So how about moving on a little bit to the area of creativity, psychosynthesis and creativity?
Well, again, Assagioli wrote a short story. Fantasia in re interiore is the name. Fantasy is the interior thing. And in which there is in nuce everything that has developed later in psychosynthesis. So I believe very much that creativity is not an area, is a way of being that can be applied to psychotherapy, to art, to science as well, but as some laws. They are a little similar to the act of will, the act of creation, as stages, qualities, and areas. But being more specific, I have seen, for instance, I am very interested in writing, being a writer myself, and I have seen that working with writing in a group, you go very fast and you don't need so much psychological interpretation to move on. So the theater, we know from the time of psychodrama of Moreno, the power of theater in moving consciousness. So if we use art and creativity, we can do a very good and fast and deep psychological process as well. So I'm very interested to combine those sides.
And you work also with counselors and therapists in this field of creativity. Would you like to say something more about that?
Just to make an example, I don't like the word case history because people are not case. I like the word stories. So for instance, when I do a group of supervision with younger colleagues, I try to use fairy tales. Tell me the story as a fairy tale. Tell me the story as an epic drama. Tell me the story as about like a comedy. And this open up some area of freedom. And so we get more information and a deeper understanding of the person that if we do the traditional anamnesis and what have you done and what are you intending to do with the person. So that's one way.
So Andrea, psychosynthesis in the world as it is today, what do you see as the next step of evolution, if I can use that term, with psychosynthesis in the world?
Well, I see two main areas. One is a sort of scientific validation of psychosynthesis. Because if you take mindfulness as an example, Vipassana meditation existed for thousands of years, and even the meditation in psychosynthesis of disidentification and self-identification, which is quite close, existed for all the time since Assagioli made the proposal. But still, because there is not a scientific validation, it seems less respectable than other approaches, which is wrong in my view. So some research is necessary, and this is one area. The other point is about what I call ethnopsychosynthesis, because I was lucky. I could work in different countries, in different cultures, and so I have seen how to adapt things, and but I have seen that the model is strong in different cultures. But still, every culture is not a one-way teaching. It's always a contribution that you get back as well. So it's a sort of enriching psychosynthesis with the richness of other view of the mind, the psyche, the soul. So, for instance, an interesting experience in this has been WISE, World Youth Service Enterprise, because it put together for 15 days young people from all over the world. We have learned a lot by that, about what you should and you should not do, how you can adapt the model. So in this sense, I think that those two areas are very, very important. Even to correct a wrong view about psychosynthesis being some sort of spiritual psychosect, so to say, which comes from some big misunderstanding, and it comes as well from some new age, in the worst way of looking at the thing, new age vision about psychosynthesis. Sometimes when I look at some website, I'm embarrassed.
So on this note, with the ethnic perspective, looking at Europe and the world today, immigration is a huge theme, and more countries are becoming sort of mixed with immigration. So how do you think? How do you think that this perspective could come into counseling or therapy more?
That's a very interesting point. Let's say I am coming here teaching in Sweden since a long time. And I could say that in every group there is always someone who has either a double identity, coming from Asian parents or South American, or and so, for instance, I guess that we have a sort of expectation that people must adjust to our view. And we didn't really take into consideration what we could take from their view on Swedish culture. So, for instance, that's an old idea that I have that should be even quite interesting for everybody, to have a meeting with all those people who either are born here or they came here from Iran, from wherever, and to see how do they see the Swedish culture in respect to psychosynthesis, which are the contribution. Well, we tend, all of us, we tend to be what I say ethnocentric. So even with good heart and respect, but we tend to have a view somewhere that we are the people who knows.
I think this is a very wise and very inspiring ending to this interview. And thank you, Andrea, for taking your time today.
Thank you for this conversation.